So today I want to talk about how we can embrace complaints from students in a positive way and use them to sort of drive change in our teaching and learning and student experience and try and just get a culture of engagement rather than sort of thinking everything's fine, because generally it's not fine, because we want to engage with student feedback. Yes, we analyze a lot of data, but we want to use that as a means to an end, and the end is interacting with students, engaging with them, helping them improve their experiences. Again, a lot of surveys are given, right? A lot of data is collected, but not a lot is done with it. And part of that is, okay, there's lots of complaints in there, it's all very negative, but if we take that head on, we can actually start to make some real significant change. Because honestly, honest feedback is what we want. It's much better to get the reality than sort of a pleasant fiction of thinking everything's fine when it's really not. So one thing I'd like to point out is that silence is not the same thing as satisfaction. So a lack of complaints doesn't mean that everything's good. It could well and probably will signal a large amount of apathy on students. They've just given up, saying, okay, there's no point complaining about this anymore. We complain about it every year. Why bother? Also, surface level surveys and asking about perhaps more trivial things can miss deeper frustration. So it comes back to also some of the questions we ask. We want to ask questions that will unearth the complaints, because that's where the real value is. And that can be a bit scary sometimes, but something we've got to really try and do. And when nothing changes, students just disengage from the whole process. So if the process hasn't been seen to be working or hasn't changed in a while, then we have to change it up, because otherwise, again, we can think the process is working, but no one's actually engaging in a real meaningful way. So we have to try and change it up. So complaints are the real gift. So I'm obviously biased, but I think the free text comments in surveys are the most important part of it. And of those, the complaints are the most valuable, the most useful, because they help to pinpoint causes, right? The root causes of problems, perhaps before they become too big. They signify engagement. Even if a student is quite angry, at least they're engaged, right? It's better than apathy. Um, if used properly, those complaints can be used to sort of drive rapid improvements, right? And if someone makes a strong complaint and there is a quick response, be it a correction or a clarification or whatever it might be, it builds trust, right? If we're just doing surface level things, there's no trust being built. But if things go wrong and then they're fixed, that is a real way to build trust with the students. So how do we sort of get more of this sort of really valuable complaints? Again, invite more open text feedback, um, prompt and sort of ask the students, okay, what in particular has been a problem this semester, whatever it might be. We can also use sentiment analysis to sort of flag particularly hot topics in historical data. Because again, we don't have to just start, okay, we'll do this next semester. We can look at what's been happening and see what the big problems are. And sentiment analysis is really useful there. And then when a student makes a complaint and it gets fixed and there's a real problem there that's been fixed, we can celebrate that and actually make a big deal of it, say to a student, and get the student up on the pictures. Look, I made this complaint, it got fixed. And then it humanizes the whole thing, makes it more of a narrative, a story, and really supports the whole process. So what are the next thing to do? Well, look for areas where you think everything's fine and dig a little bit deeper, perhaps with that sort of initial sentiment analysis or some categorization, and see what is happening in these areas that might be sort of, okay, just chug along nicely. They might not be the top of the list every year, but that's areas, there might be some real gems in there in terms of complaints. Again, respond to these issues. Okay, now a lot of our surveys are very rightly anonymous, but you can respond in sort of a nice structured way after the survey to, look, we see these complaints, we really appreciate them, and here are the changes we're making, and share those results as widely as possible.